Good evening, joyous friends on Living Knowledge Festival. Great to be here participating in this interim LK9 festival. Living Knowledge is a very important network, one of the oldest networks of science shops, not just in Europe, but around the world. And I am delighted to be participating on this occasion along with colleagues. So thank you for joining this evening. We have an excellent panel of colleagues from different regions of the world who will speak to us about their experience. And we are today focusing on how the Knowledge for Change collaborative global consortium is emerging, how this Knowledge for Change consortium is being built in different parts of the world by different hubs. I'm Rajesh Tandon. I'm a founder president of PRIA, Participatory Research in Asia, based here in New Delhi, and also UNESCO co-chair, along with my colleague and dear friend, Dr. Bud Hall, who's based in University of Victoria, and is going to join us towards the end of this session because it's still very early morning in west coast of Canada. And we have focused on this theme because we want us to discuss, after you have heard the panelists, how this Knowledge for Change consortium can be an effective global network to address issues in our communities, to produce knowledge solutions in our communities as they try to build back fairer, build back equal, build back better after the pandemic. And, our chair on community-based research and social responsibility in higher education began in 2012. And it followed the second UNESCO Higher Education Conference held in Paris in July 2009. And the focus of our chair is to build capacity for community-based participatory research in global South and excluded North, but also to do policy advocacy with national governments, with UNESCO institutions, with philanthropic foundations, so that community-university research partnerships may be nurtured, incentivized, funded, and supported. So we started our journey in 2012-13 with a global study which focused on examining several models and methods of community-university research partnership. From that study, we discovered two things. First, that a number of countries and researchers and practitioners are talking about the relevance of co-construction of knowledge, co-construction with other stakeholders outside the academe, outside the research profession. And the second thing we discovered was that there was an understanding of relevance of community-based participatory research in this co-construction, and we were happily surprised that this was pretty widespread. So we launched the second global study where we wanted to find out how the next generation is developing competencies in community-based participatory research. The next generation of both students in colleges and universities, as well as the next generation in community practitioners and civil society. And in this second study, we discovered a very interesting trend. We discovered that a large number of universities and research institutes are taking courses, are running courses for the next generation to understand and learn about community-based participatory research. But these students, because the courses are stuck in a semester or 12 weeks, 13 weeks, these students understand the theory of community-based participatory research, but get very little opportunity for practice. So learning by doing was not happening. On the other hand, in the world of practice, practitioners and civil society organizations were doing a lot of what they began to call community-based participatory research, but they had no opportunity for reflection of their experience, for systematization, for understanding the theoretical foundations of this methodology. So from this second study then, Bud Hall and I decided that we must find a way to support what we call a Knowledge for Change global consortium. And today you will be hearing from 3 of our hubs in the course of this session. So without any further ado, let me invite my research associate, Niharika Kaul, who is based with me in the co-chair in New Delhi in Priya. Niharika will give us a little quick overview of how vast is the Global Consortium of Knowledge for Change. And then we have invited 3 excellent panelists drawn from 3 different hubs, and they will share what is going on in their hub. So Niharika.
Thank you, Dr. Tandon, for that little snippet of the journey of the chair and how it began. So I'm Niharika Kaul. Great to see, to have you all here. And greetings from New Delhi. I'm going to just quickly share my screen. There we go. So I'm going to just give you a brief overview of the design and the purpose and the vision of the K4C, which emerged from the chair, which was inaugurated in 2012. We have 2 legs, as Dr. Tandon suggested, one in New Delhi and the other in Victoria. This is a unique structure of the chair in a northern university on one side and the Southern Civil Society Organization on the other. It supports North-South, South-South partnerships, as Dr. Tandon suggested, and strengthens engagement between community, civil society, and academia, promotes discourse on social responsibility in higher education, strengthens the dialogue on open science, and builds capacity of citizens to contribute to science. It also supports the flow of knowledge about bridging differences in knowledge cultures, which is a current project that we're working on with different hubs. And finally, and most importantly, our 3rd term has been renewed till 2024. So Dr. Tandon and Dr. Hall have grand ideas for the next 4 years. Having said that, the purpose of the K4C is basically twofold. One being that to train the next generation of community workers and students in theory and practice of community-based research, but also to expand, to create and to expand a network, a global network on knowledge democracy, justice, and equity as contribution to local, national, and global challenges as given within the Sustainable Development Goals. The design of the Knowledge for Change Consortium is actually quite unique. So the idea is that it is very decentralized in the sense, and it is locally led in local hubs where mentors are trained within our mentor training program that is taught by Dr. Hall and Dr. Tandon. the idea is to share training in research goals and responsibilities. The training under the mentor training program includes undertaking research on local SDGs and issues under those. And the trained mentors then in their own hubs conduct training of the new generation of students. So this is a decentralized model. And the journey of the hubs has been actually, there have been quite a few hubs in very little time. So it started in 2018 with cohort 1 and 2, with in Italy, South Africa, as you can see, Indonesia, Jaipur, Raipur in India, Canada, and in Malaysia, in Penang. And then in 2019, we had cohort 3 and 4, where we expanded hubs in Canada, in Tanzania, Limerick, Mizan Hub in Malaysia, Gulu, and in Uganda and South Africa. In 2020, last year, we were successful in shifting virtually. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we weren't able to physically meet, but we were able to shift the mentor training program online, and virtually it was conducted, and there were more hubs last year in Laval, Mexico, and Christ University in India, as well as Unite in the UK. And finally, in 2021, we have 3 more hubs. We are in cohort 6 now, and we are actually ending our cohort 6, and then cohort 7 will start end of the year, later on this year. So that has been the journey of the hubs. And in terms of the outreach, we've been able to, that now 22 hubs around the world in 120 trained mentors in 14 countries. So you can see the reach of these hubs in this map across the world. So that's a little bit of an overview of the design, the vision, and the functioning of the K4C. And now I'm going to stop my, yes, I'm going to stop. Sorry. I'm going to now invite our first panelist, Dr. Darren Lawton, who is our K4C mentor from South Africa Hub, is an associate professor and chair of mathematics department at the Durban University of Technology. Since 2003, he has held several leadership positions, including executive dean, acting deputy vice chancellor, academic, and acting senior director engagement. Apart from mathematics, he has a keen interest in community engagement. He is our K4C mentor from South Africa, and we welcome you, Dr. Lawton. I'm going to now share my screen so that you can your presentation. Just 1 second.
May I start? Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to share on behalf of our team, the K4C Hub South Africa. I gave this a title, Upset Access via Articulation, Brief History. Part of the work we do is unfurling post-school education by creating opportunities for access via articulation. Articulation meaning the migration and mobility of students across various sectors of the education spectrum, from high school, TVET colleges, TVET, technical vocational education and training, into high school, into university, sorry. Next slide, please, Erica. So, yeah, K4C, knowledge for change. The mistake one can make with that tagline is that we have knowledge to change and usually to change others. I'm about to tell a tale in which the person or the people being changed are people like me who are normally masqueraded as experts. The first slide cooperative egalitarian learning. A quote from Freire: "The teacher is no longer merely the one who teaches, but one who himself or herself is taught, in dialogue with the students who in turn, while being taught, also teach." This is going to come back to be very relevant later on. Next slide, please. So in South Africa and across the world, we have a large number of people who are not in education, not employed, and not in any kind of training. And they've been given the title NEET. And being a NEET individual is not an isolated event. The circumstances across the globe may resemble what happens in South Africa, but it's usually a combination of interrelated factors that lead young people to disengage from or drop out of school. NEETs either remain NEETs or, as a consequence of invitation or through methods of their own, gain access either back into high school, into TVET colleges, or into higher education. And it is here where we want to focus some of the work. Next slide, please. So our partner, an NGO operating south of Durban, is involved intimately in providing learners with a second chance. So basically, second chance learners who want to obtain entrance into post-school education, either TVET or higher education, and I've emphasized, you can see, free. If you ask me later on, I'll explain what I mean by that, but this is an opportunity that does not cost the learner. These are people who've been prevented from doing so for a variety of social, economic, and personal reasons. For example, learners may come from dysfunctional backgrounds in communities where the temptations of drugs and other distractions are rife, and as a consequence, they are limited to access to higher education. And of course, is the big one, they simply cannot afford it, either in terms of financial instruments or in terms of their performance. And as a consequence, they're demotivated by their own circumstances, lack the confidence and self-esteem to continue with further education. Next slide, please. So what's the modus operandi of Gyra? I didn't mention the name, sorry, but you saw it on the screen. Basically, they're involved in mitigating psychological and situational barriers that surface in the teaching and learning process generally. And I'm a mathematician who, in part of my involvement with them was in mathematics. Unusual, but exciting. And in particular to second chance learners. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not trained in providing anything outside of mathematics. And so I had a lot to learn myself. They cultivate a notion of interdependency between individuals and the collective, and they encourage both competition and collaboration amongst students. I'll say a little more about this later on. And so the co-construction of knowledge between students and teachers is what I'm about to describe very briefly. The leadership that underpins this teaching and learning of mathematics within a humane human philosophy needs to be heralded. Next slide, please, Niharika. Okay, so I'm going to be giving you some of the words of some of the students with whom I worked for some time to sell the idea of what it is that we did, because so far you must be wondering, can you get to the point, please? Well, here we go. The first is, these students don't decry the use of the word second chance. They embrace it because for them, it's an opportunity to change their lives, to take control of their destinies. Number two, in the work that we were doing, they started using words like these, which of course excited me. We were eating, drinking, and sleeping mathematics. It became part of who we were, because on a weekend, we didn't need to be encouraged to do so. We got to the point we were doing it ourselves. Now, how does this happen? How do you go from not being allowed access into higher education because your performance was poor or other reasons, to a point where you're so excited about the content of the subject matter that you actually can't wait for the weekend, or so they claim, to actually get involved? And here is a very simple, life-changing approach that I encountered myself. Number one, each member of the team, I'm going to call them that, within reason, becomes responsible for everyone else. So these students are not just students, they're told, guys, you've been given a second chance. Take ownership of it now, group yourself, support yourselves, and rely on the teacher only when necessary. And the students generally took this and ran with it. So when they are working on their mathematics, and to be honest with you, I did less mathematics with them, they did more mathematics with me. What was happening was they had decided that they would prepare themselves. So a lecture takes place, they go home and they deconstruct the lecture. They share with each other and provide each other an opportunity to teach. And in teaching, actually learn a little more, because point number 4, each unanswered question phrased to me as a student represents a gap in my knowledge. So if you ask me, why is this the case, and I can't answer, rather than be embarrassed because some of my peers, make a note of it, and that's a gap. The mathematics was not new, it was simply organized in an enabling environment. Oh, I forgot to mention this one. Each member was responsible for everyone else, and each was afforded multiple opportunities to teach and reteach. The students were teaching themselves. Now, please don't get the impression that they were left to their own devices. In a particular week, teacher would teach, questions would be asked, students go away, and when the week is done or in the evenings, they would group in order to ensure that they were up to speed with the pace of the entire syllabus. The management offered an incentive on a weekly basis. The best performing student in a test gets a reward. The most improved performance of a student in a test gets a reward. And each of the groups, as they perform collectively, the best group gets a reward. So it's incentivized, and of course, that partially drives the passion, but only so far. Next slide, please, Yarika. Okay, infused in all of this is the notion of Ubuntu, which directly translated means I am human because you are human, and together we are human. This has been paraphrased to say to the students, our collective performance is simply intertwined individual performances, and our performances depend upon each other. The students were encouraged to learn with each other, they were encouraged to learn for each other, and they were encouraged to learn from each other. So the competition and the collaboration, while they might sound like tensions, it was inculcated to ensure that collective performance becomes as important as individual performance. Now, I must let you know that the funding of this academy is contingent upon the collective performance of the whole. The funders want to see how is it going, and based upon the big how, they decide to continue funding or not. This is explained in great detail to the students whose experience of this is free. And so as a consequence, the students are aware that we collectively have to perform, but at the same time, I as an individual must perform. Next slide, please. Is the mean, the average performance of the collective. And by focusing on improving all individual performances, the consequence should be that no one will be left behind. And I want to pause for a second to look at the title of this slide. The role of the mean, the average, in meaningful mathematics. Now, the last bullet at the bottom, or the last frame, no one left behind. What was sold to the students is that the sacrifice, that's just my reminder that I've taken 11 minutes. The sacrifice, the individual sacrifice of me potentially dropping my performance by working with somebody who needs to raise their performance in order for them to pass, became ingrained in the collaborative sense. In other words, no person is going to be left behind. It's my responsibility to ensure that we all make it over the finishing line. And in so doing, we end up raising the collective average of our results, which the funders like. The funders are the funders, but we are at the receiving end of the joy of looking at this mathematics and saying, there was a time when you controlled me. Now I control you. These are words that I'm using by the students, by the way. And on the last slide, I need to sell how all this ties together. The approach that was used was driven by integral education, where learning is deemed to be a human activity that requires the integration of the body, mind, soul, and spirit. The expert usually is an expert here. Very seldom is it possible to combine the two unless it's encouraged. And so when this expert is invited to teach, and at the first time that he meets these students, halfway through a lesson, he stops and says, oh my gosh, I'm the one who's learning. That entire engineering program, part of which mathematics is integrated with a scheduled, non-formal discussion underpinned by the philosophy of Ubuntu. Once a week and sometimes twice. Non-maths, not engineering. We have discussions about why are we here and how do we make sure that we don't remain here, that we move on, and how is it possible for us to regain control of this destiny. It wasn't our fault that we were born into the situation, but at some point it becomes our fault that we choose to remain here. All these things were said, some of it by me, some by the leader, and others by the student. Students gain an appreciation of the social, cultural, and historical and ethical context of the roles they play in their homes, communities, and jobs. And the last part, as I close out, and if you want any details, the granular stuff, as Rajesh refers to it, I'll provide it in the questions and answers. But here we go. The development of self is enhanced through this process, which is manifested in their performance as individuals. They pass distinctions in mathematics and sciences, unusual, unexpected, by the way. And their work ethic is reported by the line managers that they're working for now, because part of Jaira's approach is to continue walking with the students on their journey to become lifelong learners, even in their workplace. After all of this, it's wonderful to report that I've become an expert on how little I know sometimes, because of these students who've taught me that it's more important to sit down and have a conversation about mathematics than to actually be there as the expert and say, well, E actually is equal to MC squared. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lawton. That was really fantastic to be able to get an insight into some of the processes, the thinking that goes behind using this kind of a framework for teaching and learning, where the body, mind, soul, and the spirit are all integrated in teaching and learning. Thank you so much for those that insight. Very, very, very wonderful. So I'm going to now call upon our second K4C mentor from Limerick. We have with us Eileen Hoffler, who's a senior nonprofit professional with extensive experience in strategic planning, organizational leadership, policy development, and operational implementation, and her considerable experience of establishing, managing, and evaluating community-based projects, both at home in Ireland and internationally. Eileen was previously CEO of the international volunteering and development organization Serve in Solidarity Ireland. Currently, Eileen works with the University of Limerick as community engagement facilitator for the Seawell program. She's our Knowledge for Change mentor. Welcome, Eileen, over to you.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm going to be technologically brave and attempt to share my screen. So hopefully you'll all still be able to hear and see me at the other side. Okay, I think that's worked. Can everybody hear me and can see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Well, hello to everybody. Thank you very much for your interest in our session this afternoon. I'd like to take the next few minutes to share with you the origins of our Knowledge for Change Hub here in the University of Limerick. I'd like to introduce you to our hub members and also to speak about the work that we do. I'd like to also look at how that work has been enhanced by our membership of the K4C Global Consortium. And also, I hope I've proved to you that our work also contributes to the Global Consortium. I will introduce you to a project that's very, very close to my own heart, and that's the Seawell project. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that towards the end. Oh, sorry, technical difficulties. My presentation isn't moving on. Let me try again. I'm sorry, I'll have to ask you to share if that's okay. My technological bravery hasn't paid off on this occasion.
I will just do that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You might move on. Thank you so much. So just to introduce you to this motley crew, these are the members of our K4C hub here in the University of Limerick. And our hub membership is made up of academics, practitioners, and support staff. Our membership is drawn from right across the university, from various different areas, including UL Engage. UL Engage is the community engagement unit of the University of Limerick. We also have representation in our hub from the Access Campus and the Access Office, from the School of Allied Health, from the Graduate Entry Medical School, from the Irish Academy of Music and Dance, and from Éinead na Gaeilge, which is the Irish Language School. And each of these, and of course myself from Seawell and a member of the UL Engage team, but regardless of whatever role we play, we're all very committed as a group to making sure that we promote community university participation and that we promote community-based participatory research in particular. So next slide, please. I'd just like to give you a brief history of community engagement in UL. Our K4C hub was formed in 2019. But the path of community engagement in UL was not necessarily a smooth one. While now the place of community engagement in UL is gaining strength with each passing day, it did have not a very smooth path to get to this point. And just to give it a little bit of context, the University of Limerick is a very young university established in 1973. Our motto is excellence and relevance. And one of the key features of the University of Limerick in the way we work is a dedication to experiential learning. And that's something that's been very much a part of UL and the way that UL works since the very beginning. And what this does do is it provides a very fertile ground for community engaged learning and research, and for the establishment of community partnerships and of ongoing collaborations. So I mentioned that community engagement had a bit of a patchy history. The UL Engage department, the unit that is involved in community engagement on behalf of the university, was established in 2015 and unfortunately was drastically cut back due to funding in 2018. But we were delighted to be able to re-establish in 2020, and our K4C hub was an integral part of that re-establishment, as was the appointment of Dr. Maura Adshead as our head of community engagement. Now, as you saw on the previous slide, we are gaining momentum and we are using the framework of the K4C hub and its global reach to create that synergy within the university and beyond into the communities. So next slide, please. As well as being involved in the K4C and the reach that the global network provides us with, both to profile our own community engagement and to learn about the community engagement that other members of the network are involved in, it also provides us with plenty of support and practical guidance. And it gives us an opportunity to internationally benchmark the work that we're doing. And we like to refer to that in the UL K4C hub as the UNESCO fairy dust. Next slide, please. So what is it that we do? Well, here's a selection of some of our most recent activity. As part of our work with Campus Engage and Science Foundation Ireland, we worked to create a national digital badge for those involved in community engaged learning. And as well as being involved in the creation of the digital badge, 3 of our hub mentors, including myself, took part in the pilot program and earned our digital badge as well as our facilitators digital badge. We felt this was a very encouraging development, somewhere where people's work, be they practitioners or academics, somewhere where their work in the area of community engaged learning could be recognized. We also work a lot in terms of directing strategy around community engaged learning and research, and trying to influence the policy context that underpins community and higher education engagement. But I suppose one of the key elements of the work that we do within the K4C Hub is the breadth and depth of community-orientated academic programs that we have. And those are at many levels across many faculties and in multiple communities. And each one of our K4C mentors are involved in many different programs and many different initiatives with different communities. And through the K4C Hub, this has given us the opportunity to be able to focus our effort and to gather information about the work that's being conducted right across the university. This helps to enhance what each of us are doing individually and collectively. So next slide, please. It's important that I make sure to leave you with the impression that CWEL is more than just an academic program. CWEL is a very important conduit that connects the communities in the local Limerick communities with the university. And I like to think of it as CWEL being in a very good position to match the needs of the community with the resources of the university, and indeed the needs of the university with the resources of the community. And this is an approach that's shared by each of us who have undertaken the mentor training program. You can see it in the work that Alphonse undertakes with the Patient Participation Involvement Network, and with the work that Jimmy does finding community placements for interprofessional practice. You can see it also in the programs and initiatives that Orla and Deirdre undertake in the areas of music, dance, and the Irish language. And you can very much see it also in the work that's carried out by Donal in the Access Campus and by Niamh through her work improving access to primary school children and with the UL Academy. And I'd like to think you can also see it in the work that I do on the CWEL program as well. So now I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about CWEL and what it is and where it fits into our overall efforts, and how indeed it has benefited as an individual program from involvement in the K4C Global Consortium. So next slide, please. Well, CWEL stands for Community Wellness, Empowerment, Leadership and Life Skills. And it is a community-based adult education program. It is aimed at particular communities within Limerick City, very similar to what was mentioned previously. These communities experience severe challenges. And we work very closely with local organisations within communities to identify members of the community that may be interested in the CWEL programme. The origin of the programme it goes back to 2014, when the university undertook some work with the local community here in Limerick City, St. Mary's Parish. And within that, the community identified the needs around health, well-being, personal and community development, leadership and positive change. And it was with those needs in mind that the university and the community set about co-creating a diploma that would address those needs, and hence where CWEL was born. CWEL is very much maybe a UL diploma, but it is designed by communities for communities. The structure of the programme itself is it's a 2-year evening study diploma. It covers many different areas throughout the curriculum and has a very strong project-based focus, which I will explain again in a moment. It's very much intended to build on the experience that local people have in volunteering and working in their communities. And it's about enhancing existing skills and imparting new skills. So next slide, please. What CWEL can contribute both to the community and to the university is an opportunity for a more permanent presence in the community. So here on screen, you'll see the typical CWEL calendar. At this time of the year, I'm quite busy with recruitment and finding new students. At every point in this calendar, we work very closely with local community partners. So at the recruitment phase, I'm working with local organisations to help to identify potential students. We involve our partners in the recruitment and in the interviewing, and in return, our partners support students throughout their CWEL journey. When our students come back to college in September, our first years will be starting on an incredible adventure that students have said is life informing, life transforming, that has opened up new doors for them, new possibilities that they have gained greater confidence from. And so our first years will embark on that particular adventure. Our second years will come and start to do some of their project work. So I mentioned it's very project based. The core idea of CWEL is that CWEL asks people from their local communities to identify a local community need and to design and deliver a response to that need. And the first stage in that is the research phase, where the students research, they undertake community mapping, and they undertake community consultations, which we prefer to call community conversations. It's in the autumn semester that the basis for the project work is done. Again, you can see how at each point, the local community are very involved in assisting with community mapping and taking part in the community consultations, etc. Just around Christmas time, the idea for the project starts to form and the project proposal starts to take shape. Again, our community partners are very involved in each of the communities with their local students in helping to develop these proposals, and their input is invaluable because they are the absolute experts in other projects that are happening and things that are in the pipeline. So if they see that a proposed project already happens or there is something quite similar, then they're able to inform our students about that, and our students are able to adapt the project to meet the needs of the community and not to be replicating something that already exists. In the spring semester, that's when most of the work is done around the project and the project groups are formed. And then within a very short space of time, we have taken a project from an identified need to a delivered project. It gives incredible opportunities for us to have an ongoing presence in each of the communities we work in. And it also gives an opportunity for us to showcase the work we're doing in the communities within our own universities. This annual cycle really does give us that permanent presence. And to add to this, in recent years, we have created the role of a CWEL Community Envoy. And the purpose of a CWEL Community Envoy, it is somebody who has gone through the programme, who's graduated from the programme, and is still very interested in promoting CWEL within their community. And they act to promote CWEL and to assist other students that are starting on the CWEL course. It's been a very valuable addition to the work that we do in communities. So next slide, please. I just want to tell you a little bit about our project, the Students' Project this year. It was obviously a very difficult year. It was a year when the COVID pandemic made it quite difficult for us to consider a lot of various projects. But we had started, as per the previous slide, we had started before Christmas in September, October, and we had held community conversations in an area of Limerick City known as South Hill. And during these conversations, one of the themes that emerged really strongly was the isolation that local people were feeling because of their experience with COVID. From this, the students looked to their own strengths, their own expertise, their own ability, and they had shown within the active living module in the well-being, the active living module as part of CWEL, that they had incredible talent for poetry, art, for mindfulness, for mental health. These were the areas they were interested in. And this fitted really well with the express need for something to help with the isolation in relation to COVID. So the students came up with the project, a project known as the Wellbeing Way. It involved a resource pack that was very much aimed at promoting positive mental health. And the central piece of that was the Wellbeing Way, which was a community wellness book. Most of the content in the book was created by the students themselves. It was very much a project that was by the community for the community and addressing that identified community need. The students organised a marketing campaign around the Seawell packs. They organised a social media campaign. They ran an online launch at which our mayor for Limerick City and County was in attendance. And we also had an incredible community day in the Limerick Milk Market, which is an institution here in Limerick City, where our students were, as you can see there in the photograph, were at the market giving out samples of our Seawell pack and telling people about their experience on Seawell, and of course promoting positive mental health. The students also delivered an online workshop using elements of the book as part of the Limerick Lifelong Learning Festival. And what's absolutely integral to Seawell and to the Seawell projects is making sure that the community is at the heart of everything that we do. And to make sure that that happens, each Seawell project group is assigned a K4C mentor. Now, while I'm a K4C mentor myself, my role in relation to the projects is to facilitate the project. So the K4C mentor assigned to this particular project was Dr. Orla Nuvrian, who was excellent and gave very generously of herself. And the role we feel of the K4C mentor in the Seawell project group is to make sure that community-based participatory research is at the heart of the process of creating the project. But what it also does is it achieves what Rajesh mentioned at the beginning, which is the training of the next generation of CBPR researchers. And what I particularly like about this approach is that it is training local people to be CBPR researchers in their own locality. So it isn't somebody coming in from the university, you know, as an expert, as Darren mentioned. This is making the local people themselves the expert. And I think that is the most important thing about Seawell, and I think that is the most important thing that our involvement in the K4C Global Consortium has given to Seawell in particular and to the UL K4C Hub in general. So thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you very much, Eileen. That was really enriching to see the kind of impact that Seawell has had, and keeping the community at the center of all its work, and really living up to the motto of your hub of excellence and relevance. So having said that, I'm going to now quickly call our third K4C mentor, who really is from Malaysia. Dr. Darshan Singh is a senior lecturer at the Center for Drug Research, University Science Malaysia. He has obtained his master's and PhD from USM. His research interests include understanding kratom's medicinal value and applicability amongst opiate polydrug users, identifying barriers to ATS treatment, and studying intimate partner violence risks among females who use drugs. So welcome, Dr. Darshan Singh. I'm just going to share my screen.
All right. Thank you, Niharika, for the introduction. Let me explain. Let me introduce myself. My name is Darshan Singh, and I'm one of the mentors from the Malaysia K4C at USM Hub. All right. Next slide, please. Before I explain to you about the type of community engagements that I do in Malaysia together with my colleagues, let me just give you a little bit of background information about, you know, where am I from? So Malaysia, I'm from Malaysia. Malaysia has a population of 32.6 million people, very small. Again, we are recognized for our diverse interfaith and multi-ethnic society fabric. We are also notoriously known for our appetizing and spicy delicacies, astonishing colonial architecture, amazing pristine beaches, and breathtaking fauna and flora. And I cordially invite you to visit us to experience our unique diversity. Next slide, Niharika. All right, so now everybody will be asking who we are and where are we located. Next slide. So our K4C hub is based in Malaysia, adjacent to Singapore, Indonesia, and Thailand. Geographically, Malaysia is divided into two hemispheres, the Peninsular Malaysia side and the Borneo's East Malaysia side. And our K4C at USM Hub is set up at a public institution of higher learning, which is known as University Science Malaysia, or USM, located in Peninsular Malaysia in the state of Penang with a population size of 1.7 million people. Next slide. So this is my beautiful main campus. We are known for our gorgeous greenery landscape. So we strongly encourage you to visit us and visit our campus, visit our K4C hub in Malaysia. You will fall in love with our campus. Next slide. All right. So let me just explain to you. These are our K4C hub mentors. We were trained in cohort 2. And we have 3 mentors who have participated in our in the cohort 2 training. We have Associate Professor Dr. Muzaini Mustafa. We have Dr. Ashira Abdul Rahim, and it's me. So we have 3 mentors in this K4C at USM Hub. Next slide. Okay, so what have we accomplished so far? Now the thing is, we are still in our nascent stage. We are about 2 years old, all right, 2.5 years old. We are slowly navigating to be officially recognized, given some discretion by the university so that we can carry out our CBPR work. We have conducted a series of CBPR workshops, also known as Kopitiam sessions or science cafes, with campus staffs and civil society organizations to provide an overview about CBPR. We have also translated the CBPR Training the Next Generation of Community-Based Researchers Manual into the local language to guide locally trained CBPR mentors. Next slide. Okay, we have also participated in a number of webinars with Dr. Rajesh and Bud Hall to promote our hub initiatives to our international members. We are also planning to introduce CBPR to first-year undergraduates at the university. We want to teach them to adopt CBPR principles and guiding them to initiate university community engagement projects with community partners. So this is what we are doing now, all right? Currently we are jointly commissioning a study to look at local knowledge culture practices with our K4C Hub partners. We have also contributed a book chapter to the recently released book chapter on socially responsible higher education, international perspectives on a knowledge democracy. Currently, as I was telling you earlier, when I introduced you to our mentors, me together with my 2 other colleagues, basically we have our own community engagement projects. So we champion and lead our own CBPR projects with different community members and NGOs in different communities, different sites in Malaysia. And we ensure our projects are in line and addresses UN Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide. So let me just explain to you, as I was saying, you know, we have 3 mentors. But today I will talk to you about my project, or one of the projects that we are doing at USM K4C Hub. One of our projects include working with people who use drugs. So basically, since I have I have my expertise working with people who use drugs in the community, So I decided to do a K4C project in the community in Malaysia. So I work very closely with injecting drug users, female drug users, former prison convicts, methamphetamine and heroin users, and people living with HIV in the community in Malaysia. Next slide. So let me just give you a little bit of information about my project and how the project is being executed. So basically, I work with a high-risk population I was explaining to you earlier. And these people, which are known as people who use drugs, they live outside of the university perimeters. They live outside of the university community, all right? So I was thinking it is important for me to actually work with the community that is living around the university campus, all right? So I've initiated a project, and since my expertise is with working with people who use drugs, and I get to see the drug abuse problem, it's a bit serious outside of the campus. So I decided to initiate a project. So we serve as an interface connecting local NGOs and government agencies to work with people who use drugs. So we bring people, we bring local NGOs, and we bring governmental agencies or government agencies to work with us to better understand people who use drugs in the community. So practically we engage with PUDs and their community. So it is just, we are just not working with people who use drugs, but we also work very closely with their community members, all right? So now what we do is we get into this community, we try to raise awareness on the danger of drugs. And we also empower a family of people who use drugs to be informed about addiction and recovery, because everyone out there in the community doesn't have proper understanding about people who use drugs. They always assume, they always believe that people who use drugs are criminals, are dangerous people, are useless people. They are not contributing economically to the country. Therefore, they should be detained and be incarcerated. No, this is all wrong perceptions. So basically what we do is we engage with the community, we engage with the family of drug users, and we also engage with the community to educate them about what addiction is all about and what recovery is all about. So we engage to devise local solutions. This is very important because when you work with different communities, you have to understand, you need to apply different solutions, all right? You cannot have one solution and then, you hope and you expect, it will solve issues in many different communities. No. So what we do is we sit together with people who use drugs, their family and their community, and we come up with some ideas. How can we help you? So we draw measures in addressing the drug abuse menace in the community. Next slide. So let me just explain to you some of the challenges that we face. Since we are about 2.5 years old, we are still crawling, we are still learning, how we can serve the community. So therefore, when we were implementing or carrying out this project, we experienced quite a number of issues. I would explain to you that the issues could be broken down into 3 different domains involving different stakeholders. Now, the thing is, because this project is to do with the community, so we have problems with the community. The first problem that we encountered was, tough to make people understand what we are doing. People don't know what our purpose are, all right? So it was so difficult to make them understand that we want to help them, we want to actually work with them, we want to find a solution to their drug abuse problem in the community. So sometimes people don't seem to understand our purpose. There's also a widespread belief among community members it is a waste of time helping people who use drugs in the community. So these are some of the issues that we encountered when we were going into the community, and we said that we want to actually initiate a project with the community. And they were saying, you guys are wasting time. You guys should not be working with people who use drugs. The government is doing adequately. They're detaining them and they're treating them, in control environments. But we try to explain to them that, the community also have to play a collective role in the recovery of people who use drugs. We also encountered another problem to do with the strong reluctance to participate in community-based projects. Now we get into, you know, different communities around our university campus. You know, there was a general reluctance from the community members. You know, they just don't want to participate. They said, you know, we are just not interested. So we had some problems, you know, explaining to people how important it is to actually engage in community projects with, you know, mentors, CBPR mentors from the university. There's also inherent negative perceptions about people who use illicit drugs. You know, people believe that, you know, people who use drugs are infected with HIV, they are notorious. I was telling you earlier, you know, useless people. Why waste time working with them? There's also a general aversion or unwillingness among PUDs to come forward to meet us. So now you see, we are trying to reach out to people who use drugs in the community. We are telling them that we are here to help you. But unfortunately, we also have some problems, you know, some tough time getting PUDs to come forward to engage with us, because we tell them that, you know, we want to help you. Please come and talk to us. All right. Now, the thing is, when we initiate these projects, right, in the community, there's also lack of a proper space for engagement. So we have to keep moving in, you know, just say, for example, if I were to target one community, I have to keep moving. There's no common space where I could go and, you know, and engage with the community and people who use drugs. So we have problems with space. We also encountered issues with enforcement agencies, because when we are going out to do community work, you know, enforcement personnel were a bit curious, like the police, they were a bit curious, you know, what you guys are doing in the community, you know, so they wanted to know how we are going about helping people who use drugs in the community. So we have problem one hand with the enforcement agencies. And another thing that really demotivated us was, you know, there was a claim that nothing will change with our presence. So this is one of the most difficult challenges, that we have to ensure that what we are doing, we are capable of bringing some measurable changes in the community, because the community is saying, you know, Malaysia has been there. We have achieved our independence for about 64 years now. And you get to see many non-governmental organizations coming into the community, and they have seen nothing, and they have seen, you know, nothing has changed. So that is why when we get in and, you know, we wanted to introduce CBPR concept to them, they were like, you know, what is CBPR? You know, how differently can you serve us? What are the changes that you could bring into the community? So this is very important, and these are some of the challenges that we experience from the community. We also have problems to do with the university. There's lack of funding, because the university always believe that money should be allocated for something which is more resourceful. Why waste money on people who use drugs in the community? So we have issues to do with funding. As I said, you know, if you were to carry out community projects, you need to pay for the space. You know, you need money. You know, otherwise it's difficult. Now, another issue, it's to do with community engagement projects are KPI driven. So when, you know, when I say that I would like to work with people who use drugs in the community, and they say, yes, we have our KPI, but you have to be looking at something which is more, pressing, something which is more important, something which is bigger, so that you get more KPIs. Key performance indicators marks. Why are you working with people who use drugs? So we have issues to do with KPI, because projects to do with community engagements are largely driven by KPI. Now, another problem that we have is to do with the students. There's low familiarity and interest in volunteerism among students. Though we have, you know, we have a group of volunteers in the university, but again, when you talk to students, are you keen? Are you interested to work with people who use drugs in the community? They said, oh no, they are dangerous people. You know, they are notorious. We don't want to work with them. Of course, you know, there's also what they call that security issues. But this is a problem with the students. You know, they are not sensitive enough. They have very little knowledge and information about, you know, doing voluntary services. There's also lack of experiences from students. They don't know much about people who use drugs. They always have negative perceptions. They have discrimination, perception against people who use drugs. And now another issue was, I was talking to my former vice chancellor. I had this first-hand experience when I was in University of in Canada during our training, and I saw that people who use drugs were coming into Simon Fraser University campus. So when I came back and talked to my former vice chancellor, I said we should be allowing people who use drugs into our community, into our campus. We should be engaging with them. So I get to see that happening in Simon Fraser University. I was stunned. They just allow, and these people were not dangerous. They were not harmful. They were not creating any security issues. But it's good to see students engaging with them on campus, trying to address their issues. So this is the thing. The university is not happy to welcome people who use drugs or the marginalized population into the university. So we have to go out to engage with them. Another issue that we experience is to do with the stakeholders. We have problems with the stakeholders. We have poor engagement from a local municipal council. They're not interested. It's a bit difficult. They don't really provide you 100% support. Again, as I said, we have issues to do with enforcement agencies who always allege people who use drugs must be punished. So these are some of the conflicts that we're experiencing with the enforcement agencies. There's lack of coordination and participation among community leaders with relevant stakeholders. There's also poor knowledge about drug addiction, not accepting it's a medical problem. So this is the biggest problem in the country. Everybody assume that, drug addiction, it's a social issue. It's not a medical problem. So therefore, you have to use retributive justice system to punish drug users. But the vicious cycle continues, again and again, because everyone is viewing drug addiction as a social issue. It's not a medical problem. In fact, it's a medical problem and it has to be addressed from a medical perspective. Next slide, please, Niharika. Sadly, we also had problems during the COVID-19 pandemic because of the constant lockdowns.
Darshan, may
Yes.
I request you to, compress the remaining part quickly? Then we have at least a few minutes for conversation.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have problems with the lockdowns, and our projects are also slightly affected. Next slide, Niharika. Okay, so what we hope to do in the future, we hope to train, empower, and facilitate undergraduates as well as civil society members with CBPR preambles. All right. We also aim to broaden and introduce more CBPR CE oriented projects with the aim of tackling pressing societal issues with the application of local solution based on local knowledge. We also aim to collaborate with international K4C Hub members to relearn and learn and consolidate international CBPR initiatives. And this is what we want to do, establish a reference hub for CBPR training and advocacy work in Southeast Asia with our Indonesian partner. And last not least, strengthen our collaboration with civil society organizations. Can I go to the last slide? All right, so my acknowledgement to the University Science of Malaysia, Professor Dr. Bart Hall, Dr. Rajesh, K4C Hub Mentors, Cohort 2, Datuk Professor Dr. Eileen Tan. And thank you very much for your attention. And if you have further inquiry and you would like to collaborate with us, please drop me an email. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Darshan Singh, for giving us such a beautiful overview of all the work that your hub has done in just 2.5 years, and really very inspired by your project and how it's centered around the community and how flexible solutions are found with the community to take collective ownership. So thank you very much. And now I'm going to, and thank you all of you for your wonderful presentations. I'm going to pass on the session to Dr. Tandon now so that we can take some questions.
Well, thank you, Darren and Eileen and Darshan, for a variety of perspectives and experiences. Lots of positive energy, lots of challenges, but that's the real life. Two steps forward, one back. Changing university system to pay attention to drug users on their periphery is a big change. And so keep up the good work. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to invite our participants who are here to make comments, ask questions. You can use Q&A. Somebody asked that how you will get recordings, you will get PPTs, and UNESCO Chair website. All other material is also available, so don't worry. Details and links you will get. But if you have any comments, any observations, I also noticed that there are some other K4C mentors in this session from different regions. So any of you who wants to speak or make a comment or ask a question, Kanya from Durban. Did you want to say something, Kanya? You have to unmute.
Hi, Rajesh. Great seeing you again, and wonderful presentations. I was just asking a question about how COVID has impacted. I mean, we have all these programs on the go, and I know for my own project how it's been impacted so negatively. So I was just asking the panelists to perhaps share their experiences and how instructive can this global crisis be in respect of future projects? Thanks.
Thank you. Well, very important. I saw your question, and some of the panelists can also type in their responses. Let me ask other people who want to make a comment or ask a question. You can even put your question in the Q&A box, and our panelists will be happy to respond.
There was a question about for Dr. Lawton saying that what kind of incentives do they use in terms of competition?
He gave an answer there.
Yes.
Chocolates. Other comments? Anybody else who wants to raise your hand or put your question in the Q&A? Maybe briefly, if each of the three panelists can just say a few words about this question that Kanya asked about impact of COVID on your work, on your program.
Maybe
let me ask.
Can I just share some of the what they call that ideas that Kanya was asking?
Sure.
All right. So, okay, Dr. Kanya. So there are few measures that you could actually use to engage with the community during this difficult period. I think very important for us to engage with policymakers to make them understand there's a need for a guideline to work with marginalized populations, because now with the COVID lockdowns, we cannot work with the community simply. So there's an urgent need to come up with proper guidelines with relevant policymakers to make sure that there's a proper guideline. It does not interrupt community projects, university community-led projects with affected community. And we also have to look out of the box to look for a permanent solution, and maybe something which is more sustainable in any difficult circumstances. Yep. Thank you.
Eileen, a couple of questions for you. One about how CWEL is funded, and
Yes.
I mean, somebody wants details of the course. I guess that you can share after.
I can absolutely. I can send on all the necessary links. The course for CWEL students is free to them. So our community partners identify students, and they often identify them throughout the year. So I would often know a student months before they apply. I might have met them for coffee and talk through their concerns and what have you. They then complete an expression of interest, complete an application form, and there's an interview. And once they've come through that process, then a Sewell place is free to them, but not free to the university. So there is a charge, reasonable in terms of a course charge, but absolutely beyond the scope of the budgets of some of the people that will be taking the course. So the cost is €400 a year for each of the 2 years. And what we do in UL Engage is we work very hard to try to bring that funding in from philanthropic sources. So free to the student, but we have a job of work to do in raising that money. And just in terms of COVID, our projects were very severely hit by COVID. Our students wouldn't necessarily be very IT literate, and so our biggest concern was how to keep our students involved in the project. Once we were able to overcome that, we also found that our students were a huge advantage to us. So we weren't able to travel to go into the communities that we usually work in, but because our students are drawn from those communities, Sewell and the project still had a presence, and it was invaluable to have our students based in the community at that time. What it did very much highlight was the huge disparity in terms of people's IT literacy and their access to IT infrastructure. So trying to do community consultations, trying to do online workshops with communities was quite difficult. And we put a lot of work into trying to help people to access IT and to upskill people in IT as well. So we weathered the storm as best we could. We have come out of it with skills we didn't have before. And I think it's going to be a feature of community engagement from now on, regardless of how the things go with the pandemic.
Darren, any comment from you?
Nothing helpful, because as it happened in South Africa, for 10 weeks we were in the highest level lockdown last year, and then we dropped to the next one, which we're currently in. And for reasons that are, I think, understandable, the TVET colleges were opened at level 4. And the main reason for that is they operate on trimesters, and with the damage of running 10 weeks over two trimesters, you lose more than schools and or universities lost. So from about, I'm guessing, May last year, they continue to be open. And even early on this year, when we were experiencing a second wave, they opened earlier than most others. So yeah, no strategy, but they got it right.
Thanks. Thank you very much. You know, there is a very interesting question about, you know, to Darshan, somebody has asked this question, very interesting question, that if you are having difficulty in working with people with drug use, you know, can you mobilize some community members to help find students? Similar to what Sewell program in Eileen described. And part of the K4C hub is to actually have community members who interface between the community and the university to be part of the mentor team, precisely because only then the trust and partnership with the community will be facilitated. So that's a very thoughtful question. Before I invite Bud Hall to say a few words in the end, there was one other question from an anonymous attendee. That's an interesting way of describing oneself. I guess in a digital platform, it can be anonymous. In a face-to-face, it may not be. How are these financially sustained? Well, you know, the hubs are essentially an integral part of the university system. And training the next generation is within that. You heard Eileen's response, you heard Darren's response, and you heard the difficulty that Darshan described from his university. And if it is not integrated in USM soon enough, the hub will lose its momentum in USM. And this is something that a very interesting part of the part of this. There's another question from Andrea. Andrea, do you want to say something? Make any comments? You are also part of our
okay,
K4C.
okay.
Yeah.
So I can speak. Do you see me? You don't see me.
Well, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. No, I just wanted to ask Eileen, because the Seawell program is very interesting one. I just simply love the way it, Seawell students and the experience in the projects that are run within the Seawell program are integrated with other CBPR programs that are run with let's call them ordinary students. So with other courses, that's another part of the K4C program that is run in Limerick that I think is worth having seen something to know from.
Well, that's a very interesting question, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I think there's something we can learn from Eileen. And the
Yes,
way
also
they
this is interesting for the the diversity and integration session that we'll have. I'm coordinating the final day, so this is a sort of a introduction to it as well, and a bit of publicity, propaganda, as you call
Eileen,
it.
anything quick you want to answer? Of course, there's more to it.
Yes, thanks. The Seawell program works to integrate itself into as many aspects of the university as it possibly can. So as part of the wider Seawell project group, we would also have, the university run an MA in community research, and those taking the MA in community research work alongside the Seawell students in developing the project. But we also then, because we're based in the community, sometimes students can feel a bit disconnected. So we organise, in non-COVID times, we organise for our Seawell students to have on-campus day so that they get that experience as well. We also work with practicum students who would be usually North American students who come and would sit in on the thought modules with the Seawell students. So we try as much as possible to integrate as many different types of students into the Seawell program as possible to encourage that diversity and that sharing.
Thank you very much. I can see Dr. Bud Hall, UNESCO co-chair on community-based research and social responsibility of higher education. But may I invite you to say a few words as we reach the end of this very exciting session. Welcome.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you so much, Darren, Eileen, and Darshan, for your really fascinating presentations. And what a privilege it is to hear in a little bit more detail. There's obviously big stories behind the short time you've had, but what impresses me is the complexity of the challenges that you are engaged in. That the community-based participatory research, is part of the kind of changing culture of higher education, which includes, community engaged learning. It includes, outreach and of other kinds, and includes, of course, this whole idea of the co-construction of knowledge. But each of you, from your stories, and each of you in slightly different institutional locations, have illuminated the challenges and the complexity of this structural change. You're changing the architecture of knowledge in higher education in small ways. Some of you have, some of your situations are a little bit more successful than others. Darshan is reporting, a number of frustrations. So that's fascinating. Second thing that what your work collectively tells me is that this kind of work, community-based participatory research, is not contained within a specific box. So you're actually involved in constructing or curating knowledge. You're actually involved in facilitating learning. you're actually involved in taking action on issues, and each of you have given specific issues that you're engaged in. And you can't separate, the research function from the teaching and learning function from the taking action function, which is also is fascinating and is actually challenges the way that we often think about dividing up the higher education world. A third thing that I found fascinating is each of you, whether it's Darren's bringing the students together even on weekends, or the many things that the Sewell students are doing, or Darshan's saying that we need spaces to have conversations with people who use drugs. Each of you have put an emphasis on one of the key principles of this kind of work, and that is bringing people together to talk about issues which affect them in their daily lives. And by bringing people together in those ways, you're doing all of these things. You're creating people gain confidence in talking about issues that perhaps they kept to themselves. They are sharing ideas with one another. They gain what we call academically agency. They're more able to take control of their lives. And and in terms of the structure of the university, it is contributing in larger and smaller ways to changing the relationship between higher education and the hierarchy of knowledge, which is doing. And the last thing I would say is that the engine is that each of you tell your stories. Each of you are bringing such passion. Darren with your humor. Whoever thought of mathematics as a subject for conscientization, to use Paulo Freire's term. But there you are with your good humor and your commitment, and Eileen's that Sewell, which is just a wonderful structure for pulling people together. And Darren, in spite of all of those obstacles, you continue to have this great good spirit and this great positive energy towards doing this work. And those qualities that you've exhibited are the qualities that will make change in each of your cases, and they're already doing so. The last thing I would say is, if there are people who, having listened to what everybody's been saying here, are interested in but don't have a Knowledge for Change hub in their own location, if you're interested in exploring whether or not a hub would be useful for you, but by all means drop us a line and we can have a conversation with you. But I feel so privileged to have been able to listen to this, to the in-depth story, a little bit of in-depth. There's a lot more to be said, but the stories, I learned a lot today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bud. Thank you, Darren, Eileen, Darshan, and of course, thank you, Niharika, for facilitating and bringing all of us together. And thank you all, Kanya, Andrea, and all of you who have participated in this. And we look forward to keeping in touch. Keep well and stay well. Bye-bye.